Hello, my name is Ashraf Nasser, and today I'll be refuting Aaron Beltran's claim on microdosing with psychedelics. Now, Aaron makes the major claim that microdosing with psychedelics has potential medical benefits in dealing with mental and behavioral disorders. And then he makes two supporting claims. One, first up, is controlled sessions of microdosing with psychedelics can help mental and behavioral disorder victims. And the second supporting claim is that long-term microdosing can help reduce mental and behavioral diseases. So Aaron starts off by explaining the effects that microdosing has on the human brain. And he says that it inherently, basically, is what he says essentially. He says it creates an open mindset. When you take psychedelics, especially in a controlled environment, it creates an open mindset. So actually, I found a study done by Brown University on the topic of psychedelics, and that revealed that actually there are a lot of common dangers with the usage of psychedelics. The obvious one being a bad trip, but feelings of despair, feelings of losing control, and a fear of death can actually be induced while you're on a trip. These problems are especially severe when it comes to mental and behavioral disorder stricken patients. Now, that's pretty important to his major claim. Now, this brings me to the second point, is that Aaron describes microdosing effects on a normal functioning brain. He fails to describe the effects on a mental and or behavioral stricken brain, which I believe shuts down his claim by force. So let's go to his first supporting claim. He says controlled sessions actually work. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest microdosing works as people claim it does, said Matt Johnson, a psychologist of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, when he was interviewed on the topic of microdosing. Now, Matt Johnson, psychologist at Johns Hopkins University, also had this to say about microdosing. He says it falls within the category of barely perceptible, and it's right in the range where people can so easily fool themselves. Essentially what he's saying is that it's like using a pseudo pill, a sugar pill to trick somebody into curing themselves. There's no real effect, and if any, it's so small that it's not even noticeable. Now, he goes to his second supporting claim is that he says that long-term microdosing can actually help reduce mental and behavioral diseases. Actually, according to Serendip Studio, they revealed that long-term effects of psychedelics on any amount of dosage can actually create mood swings, depression, flashback, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even induce psychosis. So I'm not sure if that's the best option for us. So in conclusion, microdosing with psychedelics can actually prove to induce mental and or behavioral disorders, and controlled sessions of microdosing has such a minute or no effect that it's practically pointless to even consider it. Thank you so much.
All right, structurally everything is solid. You identify the advocate's claims and secondary claims. There's a good summary of what microdosing is. The idea of an open mindset, you go to the process of talking about what that means. And then you don't really talk about whether or not that's important or unimportant, so I wondered why it came up as a subject anyway. Your next argument, though, is a lot clearer because you say there are dangers of microdosing, and you've got good information that suggests that there are potential problems here. You mentioned the big danger of a bad trip, but it's also related to psychiatric patients and people who have these particular problems. So in other words, the very people that the advocate's talking about treating with these things may not be the patients that you most likely want to use this material on. This is a good reasoning challenge to the advocate's claim. They're basically misapplying a generalization that's being made here, and you're pointing out that this is an exceptional situation that the evidence that the advocate presents applies to people under normal circumstances, not these unusual circumstances. and the absence of evidence from the advocate on this particular point. I think that's one of the things that you need to develop a little bit more. What information did the advocate provide? If they didn't provide any, then you need to say they don't mention a patient. There's not a doctor who's conducted a study. There's no statistical information on these particular points. You want to point out the kinds of things that are lacking in the argument. Don't just say there's no evidence on this, but tell us what kinds of things are missing in this situation. The best evidence that you have on that point is the evidence from Dr. Johnson that says there's no evidence that shows that it has this effect, and in fact that the impact would be so minute as to be the equivalent of, you used a pseudo pill, a placebo type effect, I think is the term that is used frequently. And the notion here is that any benefit is really more likely a benefit that's achieved because people believe that they're going to get something, not because of the dosage of the psychiatric or the psychotic drugs that they're being given. And then you've got to go to the second point, and I thought you had a good piece of counterclaim here about what the dangers are of this sort of thing, any kind of dosing. And once again, if we're talking about patients who are subject to these particular problems, it seems like this is a particularly dangerous place. So I thought you had good arguments on those points. I think you could strengthen the first argument by challenging the kinds of evidence that are missing on the argument. And like I said, I thought you were pretty direct on both points. All right, thank you.